Hello and welcome to yet another video about sprites, textures and sounds from one game series that ended up in another. If you haven't watched them yet, I'd recommend taking a look at the previous episodes. It's not necessary though, so you can do it afterwards. This video, however, is all about assets from Doom that were reused in some of its other titles. I'll only be talking about graphics and audio that were used in large portions of the games, not small Easter eggs. So, sorry, no Super Turbo Turkey Puncher 3000 or secret areas in Doom 2016 and Eternal. If I wanted to showcase Easter eggs, I'd make an entire video about that. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that you too can support me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can see new videos 1 week earlier than everybody else. But enough of that, let's get on with it and begin, fittingly, with yet another Doom game. Doom 2016, what the But enough of that, let's get on with it and begin, fittingly, with yet another Doom game. Doom 64. Now, for a game like Doom 64, which was built from the ground up with new pre-rendered sprites and textures based on actual 3D models, you'd think there's nothing they could even recycle, right? You could think that, but oh how wrong you'd be. This is something I noticed while working on my YouTube short about the censorship in the Japanese port of Doom 64. Namely, that a lot of the GIF sprites of the human-sized enemies were pretty much taken directly from Doom and just put on top of the 3D models. Doom guy sprites were changed the least, they just moved some of the gore pieces around a little. The sprites of the zombies and imps were also stretched a bit, and then also flipped horizontally. Considering all other death sprites in the game are a mix of 3D models and 2D sprites, I'm assuming they did this because they didn't want to have to also create unique models for every single piece of flesh and blood. Other than that, they also reused a few frames of Doom's bullet impact and blood effects. The sprite of the BFG ball is also identical to the PC games, at least in size. It seems they only took it as a base and then drew on top of it, making it look far more superior. There's also this frame of a blue particle effect, which looks very similar to the muzzle flashes of the bosses from Wolfenstein 3D. I'm pretty sure it's just a coincidence, because how many star-shaped patterns can you even draw at that scale, but I still found it funny. Some textures were also taken from Doom. All liquids like water, blood, nukage and so on are clearly based on the water graphics. And honestly, they do fit the game rather well. The exit sign, which funnily enough is called Sexit in the files, has also been reused. The letters were cleaned up and pulled apart a little, but if you compare the shading on them, you can tell they're one and the same. Similar to the graphics, most sound effects in the game are also completely different from the PC one, having been recycled from the PS1 port. But even here, many of them can also be heard in the original games. A couple of them actually went mostly unchanged. A few sounds were also kept the same, but had a couple new effects mixed in with them, mostly was from Doom 64. Like the Cyberdemon's death noise, which includes 64's explosion. The Mancubus may have a new scream while dying, but he does keep the sloppy noises afterwards. Speaking of that, the sound of chipped enemies also seems to be the original one, but with what sounds like flowing water playing on top of it. The rocket firing sound is also still the same, just with some effects of it soaring through the air afterwards. Other sounds appear to be the original ones as well, but were slightly distorted in post. For instance, the Pinky Demon and Lost Soul sounds. The Pain Elemental's pain grunts also sound very similar. And I'm not certain about these two, but it's possible they're distorted variations of the imp's death screams. Now, it needs to be said that a lot of these are simply stock sound effects and aren't really once exclusive to Doom, and that also goes for the games we'll look at later. I'm sure that the connection was very much intentional here though, considering it's a direct sequel. There's also something else I'd like to mention. I believe it was the Doom wiki which pointed out that the Cacodemon and the Pain Elemental seem to have swapped roles in this game. In Doom 1 and 2, the Pain Elemental has brown skin, 2 arms and 2 horns, while the Cacodemon has red skin, no arms and several horns. In 64, however, it's the other way around. The only difference is that the one which looks the most like the Cacodemon explodes, while the one that looks like the Pain Elemental melts away. Oh, and of course, the little detail of one of them having 2 mouths pointing in different directions. And I do believe that these mouths are the reason for why they ended up swapping their roles, because players might think the demon with twice as many ways to bite you is far more dangerous. This is of course unconfirmed, but it makes sense to me. But overall, it's interesting to see that despite the fact Doom 64 goes for a completely different mood than the previous 2 games, it still can't fully let go of where it came from. That many of the graphics and especially the sounds were just so iconic that they couldn't simply get rid of them without losing a bit of what Doom is. So, let's now take a look at 2 Doom games where the similarities are way more apparent, namely Doom RPG and Doom 2 RPG for mobile, starting with the former. Let's begin with Doom RPG's textures, as there really aren't many shares with the original game, instead opting to go for a style similar to Doom 3, which came out the year prior. One of the few I could find was this wall and its recolors, which are all based on the grey concrete walls. Another one is based on the green tech walls, in this case also grey. Now, you might be thinking, boy, these sure look like horribly compressed graphics, why didn't they just make new ones from scratch? And you're going to keep thinking that when we take a look at the sprites. Because almost every single one of them is simply a copy of a Doom graphic, just with about 1/10 the detail and colors. I get it, it was Java, they didn't have much to work with, but woof. Give me 10 minutes in MS Paint and I'll whip something better up. Doom Guy definitely got hit the worst here, because just look at how small he is. The weapons aren't any better, looking so terrible that I thought they were the ones from the Super Nintendo port. Nope, even those look better. There's really not a lot you can do at that scale, which is why certain weapon sprites were slightly tweaked. The chain gun's muzzle flash is as big as the gun itself now, probably because you couldn't even tell it was there otherwise. The BFG 9000 had its sides cut off, which makes it look rather naked. Interestingly, the muzzle flash is underneath the black tip instead of above it like in the PC games. There's also a new, quote, weapon, the fire extinguisher, which seems to be an original creation. But even here, the spray effect is based off of the BFG's firing effect as well. As for the enemies, they too were completely recycled from Doom 1 and 2 and recolored for certain types. The Zombie Man, Chain Gunner, Imp, Pinky, and Lost Soul are the only ones whose size wasn't affected in any way whatsoever. Interestingly, the Lost Soul does have a unique death sprite here, which also applies to the Pain Elemental. See, you can draw your own sprites, so do it! All other enemies are squished quite heavily to presumably still fit on the small screens of mobile phones. The Archvan and especially the Cyber Demon suffered the most from it. Oh, and the Hellhounds are in fact based on Wolfenstein sprites, as I pointed out in the first video. Other graphics are also based on Dooms like barrels and various items. I don't have access to them unfortunately, but you can see them during gameplay here. And there's even more from Wolfenstein 3D. Medkits have yellow instead of red crosses on them, which could be due to censorship. See my video on German Doom about that. I don't have access to the audio files either, but as you can tell from the gameplay, they were all ripped from Doom 1 and 2. Even the dog yelping noise comes from the Mag family of Wolfenstein. It's quite evident that the devs were seeing how much they could reuse and still get away with, only drawing new graphics when it was absolutely necessary or to fit Doom 3's aesthetic. In that regard, it really doesn't surprise me that the sounds are all the same as well, since those don't really have to get compressed to work in such a small format. But it really makes the whole thing feel like a lazy cash grab when that was probably not the case. They even just recolored regular enemies to create new ones, which is just about the laziest things you can do when creating games. Though, I gotta say, this Malwrath kind of speaks to me. I don't know why. However, the question is, did they improve anything for the sequel? Well, yes and no. Doom 2 RPG released far later than the first one, first on mobile phones in 2009 and on iPhone in 2010. The iOS sprites are all original drawings, though of course heavily based on the ones from the PC games. I'm almost offended they didn't use the classic Doom skull for the Lost Soul and Revenant though. But even in this version we can see some of the actual sprites from Doom 1 and 2, such as Doomguy's face, which shows up in both the HUD and the character selection screen hidden behind his helmet. The civilian faces also look somewhat like Doomguy's, especially these two here. But it's also possible they simply use them as a reference. The graphics from the Java edition on the other hand are exactly the same as on PC, with the larger once again being resized and touched up to fit on the smaller screen. This especially applies to the Revenant, who has a new skull here. The same goes for the Archvile, who also sports a new spine. The Cyber Demon also has two metal hooves here, which was likely done so they could more easily mirror his walking frames instead of drawing new ones. There's even two new enemies, which both appear to be amalgamations of other demons. The Sorcubus looks like a modified imp with a similar head, torso, legs and skin tone. The Watchers are very similar to Archviles, though I couldn't find an exact overlap. Maybe this one here. But considering they're both pretty much just pale skin draped over a human skeleton, it could just be a coincidence. The Icon of Sin also makes a return here, though it appears to be an original drawing in both versions. However, the player can also battle the Virtual Icon of Sin, abbreviated to VIOS, whose graphics and overall design look rather close to the Pinkies. Interestingly, all enemies have green instead of red blood in the Java edition, similar to Wolfenstein RPG, which came out around the same time. This also applies to the teeth of the Pinkies in Macubi, though not the Revenant's legs, not even when he's dead. This was definitely done to get a lower age rating for the game, as was the case with the GBA Doom titles, which I discussed in this video of mine. However, unlike in those games, it's extremely poorly done here, with most of the blood just being one flat color. Especially the Mancubus looks comically bad in that regard. It's almost like they did this right before release and couldn't be bothered to make it look nicer. At least they put a bit more effort into the sprites of our good old friend Doomguy. He is also based off his PC counterpart, just with a much more comfortable pose and redesigned helmet. Onto the textures, of which there are not a lot to discuss either. Among the only ones I could find was the Switch texture, which shows up completely unchanged in the HUD. Same as this blue tech texture. The game also reuses the exit door graphics, just squished slightly so that fit a 64x64 square. The rest were more based off of Doom 3's designs, as was the case with the other RPG. And much like in that one, all the music and sounds were taken from Doom 1 and 2 as well. For some reason, this is not the case for the Java edition, where the sounds are unique but awful. Don't really understand why, as the previous game had no issue using the actual sound files. Overall, they put a lot more effort into this one than the first Doom RPG in both versions. The green blood of the Java port is really out of place, though at least they fixed that for the iOS one. But those were all the Doom titles that recycled graphics and audio. So let's now round off this video with a game series that shares a lot of similarities with Doom, especially when it comes to the overall gameplay: Quake. Considering Quake is a mainline FPS game made by id Software, it should really come to nobody's surprise that it took a lot of inspiration from the previous titles. And boy howdy did they take inspiration. Since the game is fully 3D, unlike Doom, there's not that many sprites they could have really copied. There's these water bubbles that kind of look like the Bullet Impact sprites. I know, very exciting, but there's also these glowing yellow orbs that only appear in E4M7, which are pretty obviously based off of Doom's power-ups. Not only do they have the same shape and size, but they even have a light spot in the same place. Alright, I getcha, that's not what you're here for. No, you're here for me to point out that Quake Guy's face is literally just Doom Guy's paint sprite. Yeah! Notice how the nose, mouth area and teeth line up perfectly. Even the eyes do, the only difference is that they've been seemingly moved a bit closer together. They probably did this so the head would fit inside the helmet, as they also used this graphic for the player model. This also applies to other variants like the ones where he's bleeding or has red eyes. His eyes in these side-glancing faces could also be based off of Doom Guy's, though it's not a perfect fit. What is a perfect fit, however, are Doom Guy's and Quake Guy's grinning faces. Look how beautifully that fits. The same also goes for his quad damage face, which seems to be just Doom Guy's ouch face. If you don't see it right away, let me just take Quake Guy's eyes and put them over Doom Guy's. There we go. Sorry for the horrifying visual. It's possible the others are also based off the ones from Doom, maybe changed up here and there, but I can't be bothered to point out every single instance. In the previous video, I pointed out that the bosses from the Mac family of Wolfenstein were almost certainly made using Doom Guy's faces. Some people said that this could just be because the games share the same artist, Adrian Carmack. I guess the fact that they fit perfectly and the parts already reused several other graphics from Doom wasn't enough evidence. In this case, however, I think it's indisputable that these two faces are truly one and the same. Had they wanted to draw new ones from scratch like they did with Doom after Wolfenstein 3D, they could have done that. But the fact they have the same size and positions of facial features is undeniable. Now let's hop on over to the textures, of which there are many. For starters, some of the water and slime graphics are based on the water and slime graphics from Doom respectively. These two lovely metal walls were also taken from these brown-green ones, which kind of confuses me. Out of all the parts to use, why the ugliest and most boring ones? At least they were a bit more original with this texture, which is half of this Doom 2 door just mirrored. This piece of wood is also interesting as it comes from the big wooden checkerboard walls that can be seen in Doom cell levels. Try to see if you can spot it. It's from this square right here, just squished and stretched a bit. And here we have... the classic, a texture that made its way into 3 different games. First seen in the Mac family of Wolfenstein 3D, later in Doom 2, and now in Quake. And each iteration added more and more detail to the last, much like the games themselves. Kind of poetic. Hey kids, can you say skulls? Because we sure do have a lot of those here. Like I said in the previous video, it really loved using this one. The skulls on these walls were likely taken from the blue and red ones on the wooden doors in Doom 2. And look, there's even one from Spear of Destiny. It's a bit less obvious for this one, as it seems to have some sort of pair of fangs, but if we lay the skull on top, you can see the similarities. There's also a wall that's just full of skulls, which includes the one we've just seen, as well as the cursor from Doom's title screen. Meanwhile, the ones on this texture bear a very striking resemblance to the skull keys. And finally, this wall has a neat pattern of bigger skulls, which are obviously based off the Doom skulls as well. You can see this really well if we take the cool sunglasses skull switch from Doom 2 and shrink it down to half its size. And there's yet more hellish imagery that made its way into Quake. These small metal lion heads can also be seen over here in this texture, just stretched by 1 pixel to make them fit better. The larger variant, or at least it's not an eyes, can be found in this piece of decoration. a slightly stretched Tater face of yet another texture as part of it as well, even in 2 different places. And it still doesn't stop there, as even the snout of one of the gargoyles makes an appearance in it. I'm so in love with this one. It's like a condensed trip through Doom's Hell levels. The only one that's missing is Sandy's wife. Oh well. But Hell only makes up one half of Doom, the other one being futuristic technology. And considering Quake shares that theme as well, it's understandable that they copied a lot of it. For instance, all of these tech walls consist of mirror parts of this texture from Doom. The same goes for these brown walls. But it also appears that they laid this graphic we've seen at the start on top of them. It's fairly difficult to see, but notice how the 2 horizontal bars here are in the same place as the grooves of the other texture. However, it's completely possible that I'm talking out of my bum here. These panels also include some parts of Doom's computers, like these red bars over here, or the grid pattern of this one. Yeah, basic geometric shapes aren't proof, I know. But see this texture at the top? That's definitely the same. There's one final shared texture I only saw randomly in someone else's gameplay, but which wasn't available on the texture's resource. It's these 2 planks of wood connected by metal sheets. And those are all the actual graphics that were repurposed from Doom. But it seems Quake took some other inspirations too. These hanging corpses, for example, look extremely similar, though I checked and they're not the same. But as Simeon Stumbler pointed out, the HUD sprites of Doom's prototype weapons look a bit like Quake's nail gun and super nail gun. I think you can see the resemblance more in the world sprites from the 0.5 version. This one, which Shadow turned into a spinning rocket launcher, could have also easily been a spinning nail gun. Now let's take a quick listen to the few sounds Quake shares with Doom. There's not a lot, and there's even less for me to talk about. They're pretty much the exact same ones, just with a different pitch and length. Here's a comparison. As I mentioned at the start, these are all stock sound effects, so it's more than likely they weren't recycled from Doom specifically. But all in all, it really goes to show just how similar the 2 games were, that they could so easily reuse assets from Doom and Quake. In fact, considering that both are a mix of technology and gothic horror, you could even put Quake's textures into Doom and they'd still fit. Especially in regards to Doom Guy and Quake Guy, as they share the same face and even wear similar armor and use similar weapons. And considering how Doom Eternal is full of dimension hopping and ancient gods, it does feel as if the 2 series merged at some point. So then, let's continue with the game's sequels and see how many connections there are to the Doom games, if any at all. I'm bunching both games together because there's not enough for either of them to warrant a chapter of their own. The only shared sprites I could find come from the game's BFG 10K, an obvious sequel to the BFG 9000. Both of the projectile and impact graphics are identical to each other. In regards to textures, some of the liquids are based off the water and sludge graphics of Doom. I'm not sure about this one, as it definitely looks like a Doom water texture, but it doesn't fit any of the frames that are in the game. Maybe it comes from a 5th frame that went unused? It's not impossible, since Quake 2 does reuse some liquids of Doom's prototype versions. More notable is this quite painterly take of the classic cobblestone wall, which was also flipped and rotated. Another Doom 2 texture makes a return, namely these bricks, which are rearranged in some manner I really don't care enough about to figure out. Look, you can see it's the same, I can see it's the same, let's not waste our time with it. Other than that, there's really only this dirt ball, which was taken 1-to-1 from Doom 2. And once more, out of all the textures to use, why this one in particular? What about it is so appealing that they just had to use it in the most groundbreaking shooter at the time? Aside from that, it's possible that these hexagonal floor tiles are based on Doom's, but if so, in shape only. And the last graphic that looks in any way familiar is this golden skull, which might be a distorted form of the Doom one. As for audio, there's even less than in Quake 1. They're also completely unchanged this time, likely being the original stock sounds. Here's another comparison. In conclusion, while Quake 2 does still use a couple of graphics from previous games, it does so very sparingly. Considering it looks far more advanced, with most textures being computer generated, most of the older stuff probably wouldn't have fit. A great example of this is the Sandstone Wall. It made its way into 3 separate games, but was suddenly absent here. And you can see the reason for that when we compare it to some other Stonewall graphics. As great as it looks, they clearly weren't struggling with creating new ones. And in that regard, it confuses me why they didn't also make new water from scratch, instead of recycling the same textures from 2 games ago. I swear they look worse and worse with each new entry. But that's about it for Quake 2. I'm only gonna mention its sequel very briefly because there's honestly nothing there. Doom Guy is an actual playable character in the game, just called Doom here, as well as a female variant called Crash. But for some reason, they didn't give him any other grunts from the classic games, instead opting to record new ones. I mean, come on. You bring him back, but then you won't even commit to the idea? Lame. The only other connection to Doom is the BFG 10K, which probably has more to do with Quake 2 though. But at this point in time, it seems they realized that just recycling old graphics wasn't going to cut it anymore. Games were advancing fast, relying more on 3D models than 2D sprites, and with how big texture sizes were getting, still using the same 64x64 tiles wasn't an option. And that's all fine and good, and games have come an even longer way since, with astonishing visuals and audio. But I feel that a bit of the soul has been lost. The connections between Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake are pretty obvious, as I've demonstrated in these videos. You see that little portrait at the bottom and go, yeah, this is an it game. But what does Quake 4 really have to do with Quake 1? Or Wolfenstein The New Order with Wolfenstein 3D? If it weren't for the names, you'd barely even recognize them as being part of the same series. That's not saying they're not good games, but it shows just how much time has changed, how diverse and complex development teams have gotten. It's not just one guy making audio music for every game in a row anymore. Well, unless they're gone, of course. I suppose you have to look at indie games to find all that. But anyway, what did you think? Did I miss any graphics or sounds? I haven't played much of Quake 1 and never even touched 2 and 3 before, so I'm sure there's a couple things. Do let me know down below. I'd definitely like to make more videos like these, as I already wrote down a couple of things of non-it games that took inspiration from Doom and even from Wolfenstein 3D. Tell me if you'd like to see that too. And if you want to support me and my channel further, then you can do that by leaving a like, subscribing, and even by donating directly to my Patreon. Anything is appreciated. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day, a happy new year, and goodbye.